There must be a mistake. These are luxury seats. The gate agent's voice, sharp as glass, cuts through the noise of the airport. She's staring at the Harrison family, a black family of 4, holding valid first-class tickets. The agent, Susan Miller, smirks at them. "I'll need to ask you to step aside. I can't just let anyone into this cabin." But Susan just made the biggest mistake of her career, because she has no idea who the father is. And in a few moments, the plane's captain is going to walk out and expose her bigotry by snapping to attention and delivering a salute that will silence the entire airport. The digital clock on the bedside table flashed 3:17 a.m. Marcus Harrison had been staring at it for an hour. Outside their suburban Atlanta home, the world was still and dark, but in his mind, it was all noise and heat and the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of rotors that weren't there. He slid out of bed, careful not to wake his wife, Diana. His left knee joint complained with a dull, familiar ache, a souvenir from a life he rarely spoke of. He limped quietly to the hallway, checking on his children. Jamal, 16, was a sprawl of limbs and headphones, his phone already glowing faintly in his hand. Maya, 10, was curled tightly around a worn teddy bear, her breathing soft and even. This trip was Diana's idea. A healing trip, she'd called it. A new memory. Today was November 1st. 15 years ago, on this exact day, Marcus had been Master Chief Petty Officer Harrison, and he had done things in the red sand off the Somali coast that had earned him a Navy Cross and a permanent limp. He'd also lost 2 men from his team. The medal gathered dust in a box in his closet. The date, however, was a scar that never faded. For 14 years he'd spent this day in his workshop, pretending to fix things that weren't broken, lost in a fog of memory. But Diana had been insistent this year. "We are not letting this day own you anymore, Marcus. We are taking it back. We're going to Washington, D.C. We'll visit the memorial. We'll see the monuments. We'll be a family. Together." And she had done it. For 2 years she had meticulously saved, taking extra shifts as a hospital administrator, cutting coupons, managing their budget with military precision. She had saved enough for 4 first-class tickets on Global Reach Airlines, Flight 1128, from Atlanta to Dulles. "If we're making a new memory," she'd said, placing the tickets in his hand, "we're doing it right. You've spent your whole life giving everyone else comfort and security. It's your turn." He'd tried to protest. The cost was astronomical. It was wasteful. But seeing the determined hope in her eyes, he'd relented. Now, 4 hours later, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, ATL, was a roaring river of humanity. The pre-dawn quiet had shattered, replaced by the clatter of rolling bags, the echoing announcements, and the stressed energy of thousands of people trying to be somewhere else. Marcus felt the familiar tension in his shoulders. Airports, with their crowds and confined spaces, always put him on edge. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his eyes scanning, observing exits, behaviors and patterns, habits forged in places far less forgiving than a domestic terminal. "Jamal, phone in the pocket through security. Maya, hold my hand. Diana, I've got the bags," he murmured. They navigated the security line, a predictable river of shuffle step. As they approached the TSA agent, Marcus saw the man's eyes flick over them, then settle on him. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step over here for additional screening," the agent said, his voice flat. It was the random check. Marcus nodded, the word random hanging in the air. He saw Jamal roll his eyes, a familiar frustration tightening the boy's face. "Again?" Jamal muttered. "It's fine, son," Marcus said, his voice calm. He stepped into the glass tube, raised his arms, and mentally detached, He endured the pat-down, the swabbing of his hands, the meticulous search of his carry-on. The agent pulled out his small shaving kit, poked through it, then zipped it up with practiced indifference. "You're all set." Marcus simply nodded, collected his things, and rejoined his family. Diana gave his arm a reassuring squeeze. She knew. She always knew. They took the plane train to Concourse B, the atmosphere growing more rarefied as they approached the gate. The passengers here seemed to move with a different rhythm, more bespoke suits, fewer character-themed backpacks. They found gate B32, a large, brightly lit area already filling up. The sign above the desk read, "Global Reach Airlines, 11:28 to IAD, Washington Dulles, on time." Diana let out a small, happy sigh. "See? We're here. We're early. Everything is perfect." Marcus managed a small smile for her. Everything is perfect. They sat, a small island of anticipation, Maya colored in her activity book. Jamal, headphones back on, was editing a video on his phone. Diana reviewed their itinerary. Marcus just watched. He watched the woman at the gate desk. She had blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and a name tag that read, "Susan Miller, Customer Service Director." She was typing with a furious, percussive force, her face a mask of pinched stress. She barked at an elderly couple who asked about a seat change. "The flight is full, sir, as I've said 3 times, and dismissed a young backpacker with a wave of her hand. "If your bag doesn't fit in the sizer, it's $50. Next." Marcus recognized the type, a person who mistook a little bit of authority for a whole lot of power. His gut tightened. He'd learned to trust that feeling. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." Susan's voice crackled over the PA system, sharp and metallic. "We will now begin boarding Global Reach Flight 1128 to Washington Dulles. We invite our active duty military personnel and anyone needing special assistance to board at this time." A soldier in uniform and a family with a stroller moved forward. "And now," Susan continued, her voice taking on a saccharine, insincere tone, "we are pleased to invite our first-class guests, Zone 1, to board." Diana smiled, her eyes bright. "That's us. Come on, everyone, grab your bags." Marcus stood, his knee giving a sharp twinge. He picked up his carry-on and Maya's small pink suitcase. The Harrison family, holding tickets 2A, 2B, 2C, and 2D, stepped into the line. And that's when they met Susan Miller's eyes. Her gaze swept over them, and the practiced, brittle smile on her face didn't just fade. It curdled. It was a micro-expression, over in a second. But Marcus, trained to see such things, saw it all. Assessment, confusion, and immediate unfiltered suspicion. Susan Miller was having a terrible morning. Her car had a flat tire, she'd spilled coffee on her new blouse, and her supervisor, Mr. Davenport, had just reamed her out for her gate's poor on-time departure statistics. She was staring down the barrel of a fully booked holiday week flight, and her patience was thinner than the recycled air in the terminal. She saw the family of 4 approach. They were, in her estimation, out of place. The father was quiet, but he had a presence. The mother was elegant, but looked stressed. The teenage son had that sullen, hooded look she associated with trouble. The little girl was, well, just a little girl. But they were in her line, the first-class line. "Good morning," Diana said, offering a warm smile as she stepped up to the podium. She held out their 4 boarding passes. Susan didn't return the smile. Her eyes flicked from Diana's face to the tickets, and then back to the family. "May I see your boarding passes?" she asked, her tone implying they were holding stolen property. "Yes, here they are," Diana said, her smile faltering slightly. Susan took them. She looked at them, one by one. 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D. The first row of first class. She scanned the first pass. Beep! The light turned green. She scanned the second. Beep! Green! The third. Beep! Green! The fourth. Beep! Green! The computer confirmed they were valid. But Susan's gut, a gut she trusted, a gut marinated in years of her own biases, told her something was wrong. These kinds of people didn't just buy 4 first-class seats. Not for this flight, not at this price. They must be rerouted from a cancelled flight or on buddy passes, or most likely they were trying to pull a fast one. She held the passes, not returning them. She stared at her screen, frowning. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked. His voice was very soft, very deep. Susan looked up, startled. She hadn't expected him to speak. "I'm just checking something," she said dismissively. She typed a few keys, pulling up the PNR, the passenger name record. Purchased 8 months ago. Credit card, Amex, full fare, no upgrades. This confused her. It contradicted her assumption. So she decided to ignore it. "There must be a mistake," Susan said, her voice now loud enough for the people behind them to hear. Diana stiffened. "A mistake? It says Gate B32, Flight 1128. "Yes," Susan said, drawing the word out. "But these are luxury seats. Zone 1. Are you sure you're at the right gate for your tickets?" The implication was clear. Jamal, who had been texting, suddenly looked up, his eyes flashing. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. "She just scanned them. They're ours." "Jamal," Diana warned, putting a hand on his arm. "No, Mum, she's accusing us. You heard her." "Young man, I'm just doing my job," Susan said, her tone dripping with condescension. "These tickets are very expensive. It's highly unusual. Perhaps you were meant to be in the main cabin, and there's been a computer error." The line behind them was growing. A man in a crisp Brioni suit, exuding impatience and expensive cologne, tapped his foot. "Is there a problem here? Some of us have connections." Susan looked at the man, let's call him Chad Peterson, and gave him a commiserating look, as if they were partners in this inconvenience. "I'm trying to sort it out, sir. I have a ticketing irregularity." "A ticketing irregularity," Diana repeated, her voice losing its warmth, replaced by a steely cold. "Agent, our tickets are valid. We purchased them. We are confirmed in those seats. Please return our passes so we can board." "I can't do that just yet," Susan said, feeling the man's support. She felt empowered. "We've had a recent string of issues with fraudulent mileage redemptions and counterfeit upgrade vouchers. I'll need to verify the purchase." "You just saw the purchase on your screen," Jamal shot back. "That's enough," Marcus said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Jamal's mouth snapped shut. Marcus stepped forward, placing his hands flat on the counter. He was not tall, but he seemed to take up all the air. He stared at Susan, his eyes flat and unreadable. "Mum, my family and I are going to Washington, D.C. These are our tickets. We are going to board this plane, now." There was something in his voice that made Susan's heart jump. But she'd already committed. Backing down now, in front of the other first-class passengers, would be an admission of error. "Sir, you are not in a position to make demands," she snarled. "I am responsible for the integrity of this cabin, and I will not be intimidated. I can't just let anyone into first class." "Anyone?" Diana echoed, her voice trembling with rage. "Anyone like us?" "Oh, come on," Chad Peterson huffed from behind them. "This is ridiculous. It's obvious what's happening. They're trying their luck. Just kick them to the back of the bus so we can board. I'm in 3A. I'd like to get my pre-departure drink." Susan nodded at Chad, feeling validated. He got it. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you and your family to step aside. I'm calling my supervisor. We'll get this sorted out, and if your economy seats are still available, we'll get you on this flight." She picked up the phone at her desk to call the operations center. "Step aside," Marcus repeated. He didn't move. "Step aside, or I'll call airport security," Susan threatened. And that's when Jamal, silent since his father had spoken, lifted his smartphone. He angled it slightly, hit the record button, and held it low by his side. The air at gate B32 crackled. The buzz of the crowd had died, replaced by a focused, uncomfortable silence. Dozens of people were now watching the drama unfold. "I will not step aside," Marcus stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "We are ticketed passengers. You are denying us boarding." "I am not denying boarding," Susan retorted, her voice rising in pitch. She was still holding the receiver of her desk phone. "I am verifying a questionable purchase. It's standard procedure." "This is not standard procedure," Diana said, her administrative background kicking in. "You have scanned our passes. They cleared. Your system shows they are valid. You are now engaging in targeted harassment. I want your name and your employee number." "My name is right here," Susan scoffed, tapping her badge. "Susan Miller, and I'm the director on duty. You'll get my number when I'm good and ready." "Mum, I'm recording this," Jamal whispered. Susan's head snapped toward him. "Recording is prohibited in this secure area. You delete that immediately, or I will have you arrested." "That's not true," Jamal said, his voice surprisingly steady. "It's a public space. I have every right." "Insolent!" Susan spat. "Susan, what is the hold-up?" A new voice cut through the tension. A flight attendant, wearing the Global Reach uniform, had stepped out from the jet bridge. Her name tag read, "Sarah, in-flight lead." She had a kind face, now creased with concern. "The captain wants to close the door in 10. We have a tailwind, and we can make up time." Susan, visibly annoyed by the interruption, lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "I'm handling it, Sarah. I have a situation. This family is claiming these first-class seats, but, well, look at them. It's clearly a mistake." Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at the Harrison family, standing firm. She looked at the boarding passes in Susan's hand. She looked at the line of impatient, wealthy-looking passengers behind them. She stepped forward and spoke directly to Diana. "Ma'am, I am so sorry for the delay. May I see your name?" "Diana Harrison. My husband, Marcus, and our children, Jamal and Maya." Sarah stepped behind Susan's podium and typed the name into the secondary terminal, the in-flight manifest. "Yes, I see you right here. Harrison, party of 4, seats 2A, B, C, and D. Pre-ordered the vegetarian meal and the child's meal." She looked at Susan. "They are fully confirmed. They've been in our system for 8 months. What is the problem?" This was a direct challenge to Susan's authority, and Susan couldn't stand it. "The problem, Sarah, is that I don't believe these tickets are theirs. It's my discretion as the gate agent. I'm calling a supervisor." "You're calling a supervisor to override a paid, confirmed manifest?" "Because you have a feeling," Sarah argued, her voice rising. "Susan, this is not procedure. This is prejudice." "How dare you!" Susan shrieked. "I am protecting this airline's revenue. You just want to get your commissions and leave. I'm the one who has to answer to corporate when we find out they used a stolen credit card." The accusation hung in the air, sickening and ugly. "A stolen credit card?" Diana's voice was a whisper of pure ice. "You are accusing my family of a felony." "Prove it's not," Susan challenged. "Show me the credit card you used to purchase them, the American Express." This was it. The final, blatant line in the sand. "We are not required to do that," Diana said, her hands trembling. "This is humiliation." "Then you're not boarding," Susan declared, crossing her arms. "That's enough." The voice was not Marcus's. It came from the jet bridge. It was a man's voice, deep, powerful, and utterly commanding. It sliced through Susan's tirade like a hot knife. Every head turned. Striding out of the jet bridge, ducking slightly to clear the doorway, was the captain. He wore the Global Reach pilot's uniform with 4 stripes on the shoulder. But he wore it with the unmistakable bearing of a man who had worn a different uniform for a very long time. He was tall, in his late 50s, with silver-grey hair and sharp blue eyes that were currently fixed on Susan Miller like targeting lasers. "Captain Holloway," Susan stammered, her entire demeanor changing in an instant. She was a bully, and she had just run into a bigger authority. "Sir, I was just handling a ticketing issue." "I heard what you were handling, Ms. Miller," Captain Thomas Holloway said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I was in the cockpit, and your voice carries. You are holding up my flight and harassing my passengers." "But sir, these passengers are in my manifest," Holloway cut her off. He didn't even look at Susan. His eyes moved to the Harrison family. He assessed them in a quick, practiced glance. Diana, proud and angry. Jamal, phone held up. Maya, hiding behind her father's leg. And then his eyes landed on Marcus. Time seemed to slow down. Captain Holloway's gaze lingered on Marcus Harrison. It was an analytic stare, the kind of look one professional gives another, assessing, cataloguing. He looked at Marcus's posture, the way he stood, balanced slightly more on his right leg to favor his left. He looked at his hands, calloused and still. He looked at his eyes, which were steady, watchful, and held no fear. And then Holloway's eyes dropped. They fell to Marcus's left hand. On his ring finger, next to his simple gold wedding band, was another ring. It was a simple, nondescript silver band, one you wouldn't notice unless you knew what to look for. But it bore a small, dark blue, circular emblem. It was worn and faded, but to the captain, it was as clear as a beacon. It was the insignia of the United States Navy's Special Warfare Command, a SEAL. Holloway's professional demeanor didn't just crack, it evaporated. His jaw went slack, and a look of profound, thunderstruck recognition washed over his face. "My God," Holloway whispered, so softly only Marcus could hear it. He took a half step back, as if to get a better look. His eyes snapped back to Marcus's face, searching, probing. "Excuse me," he said, his voice thick. He walked right past Susan, ignoring her completely, and stood directly in front of Marcus. He was a good 6 inches taller, but he looked at Marcus as if he were the giant. "Harrison," the captain said, testing the name. It's not. Is it?" Marcus just stared, confused. "I'm sorry?" Holloway's eyes were intense. "The USS Bainbridge, 15 years ago, Somalia, piracy incident, Task Force 151. Marcus's blood ran cold. He felt the air leave his lungs. It was like being struck. He hadn't heard those words spoken in that sequence in over a decade. His face must have betrayed him. "It is you," Holloway breathed. His eyes suddenly shone with an unspeakable emotion. Your Hammer." Marcus's face went white. Hammer was a name from another life, a name buried with the men he'd lost. Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Captain Thomas Holloway's response was not verbal. In the middle of the crowded, noisy Concourse B at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, he drew himself up. His back, already straight, became a steel rod. His shoulders snapped back, his chin tucked, and with a speed and precision that was startling, his right hand flew up to his brow, fingers extended and joined, palm down, in a perfect, crisp, military salute. The snap of his hand hitting his brow was audible. The entire gate area, which had been buzzing, fell into a profound, echoing silence. All anyone could hear was the distant hum of the terminal's ventilation. Susan Miller's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Chad Peterson, the man in the suit, froze with his phone halfway to his ear. Jamal's hand, holding his own phone, was rock steady. Holloway did not move. He held the salute, his eyes locked on a stunned Marcus Harrison. "Master Chief Marcus Harrison!" Captain Holloway's voice boomed, clear and powerful, resonating through the terminal. "It is an honor, sir." He held the salute for another long second. Marcus, his mind reeling, his training buried deep in his bones, reacted instinctively. He straightened his own back and gave a short, respectful nod of acknowledgement. "At ease, Captain." Holloway slowly, deliberately, lowered his hand. But he did not break eye contact. I'm just a pilot for Global Reach now, Master Chief," Holloway said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I was Captain Thomas Holloway, United States Navy. Retired." He gestured to Marcus, then turned to address the stunned, silent crowd. This man you see right here." Then he turned to Diana, his eyes softening. "Ma'am, young man, young lady. I don't know if you fully know. I don't know if he ever told you." He turned back to Marcus. "Sir, I never had the chance to thank you." "Thank me for what?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. "Captain, I don't know you." "You don't know me," Holloway said, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. "But you knew my son." The silence deepened. "My son," Captain Holloway said, his voice breaking, "was Lieutenant Michael Holloway. He was the pilot of the Nightshade 2, the helicopter that went down." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Nightshade 2. He remembered it all. The acrid smell of burning aviation fuel, the frantic radio calls, the high-pitched zing of bullets cutting the air, the weight, God, the weight. "Michael Holloway," Marcus whispered. He had broken legs, both of them, and a punctured lung." "Yes," Captain Holloway said, openly weeping now. "Yes, that was my boy. I was the task force commander, back on the Bainbridge. I was the one who heard the Mayday. I was the one who heard the bird down. And I was the one who was told a rescue was impossible, too hot, too many hostiles." He took a deep, shuddering breath and pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. And then, over the comms, I hear a voice. A calm, steady voice. It was this man, Master Chief Harrison. He said, "Sir, with respect, impossible is not a variable right now. I'm taking my team." The entire gate was listening, rapt. Jamal's camera was now held high and proud, capturing the captain's face, Susan's horrified expression, and his father's pale, shocked face. "Master Chief Harrison and his 3-man fire team," Holloway continued, his voice regaining its command, "went against direct orders. They ran 2 miles, through open, hostile ground, to that crash site. They found my son and his co-pilot trapped in the wreckage, with enemy fighters closing in. He did what anyone would have done," Marcus stammered, deeply uncomfortable. This was the exact thing he'd spent 15 years trying to forget, and this captain was broadcasting it in an airport. "No, sir," Holloway countered, his voice ringing. "He did what he did. His team laid down covering fire while he personally cut my son and the co-pilot out of the wreckage. One of his men, Petty Officer Davis, was killed right beside him." Marcus flinched, the name a fresh pain. "He didn't stop," Holloway said. "He got my son, Michael, onto his back. He grabbed the radio, and he carried my son, a 190-pound man with all his gear, for 2 miles, back to the extraction point. He did this with a ruptured eardrum and, as I later learned, a knee that had been shot out in the first 100 yards. He stared at the crowd. He saved the entire crew, My son is alive today, with a wife and 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, because of this man. Because of Master Chief Marcus Harrison. Holloway's eyes, burning with a righteous fire, swung from Marcus and landed directly on Susan Miller. He was awarded the Navy Cross for that action, Holloway boomed. This country's 2nd highest award for valor. An action that happened 15 years ago today. Diana gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. This was the anniversary. This was the why. It all clicked. This was the source of the nightmares, the reason for the limp, the cause of the silent pain he carried every November 1st. She looked at her husband, this quiet man she loved, and saw him for the first time through the captain's eyes. "And you," Holloway said, his voice dropping to a lethal, icy whisper, turning all his attention to the gate agent. "You, Miss Miller, questioned his right to be here." Susan Miller was the color of chalk. Her entire body was trembling. I didn't know," she whispered, her voice pathetic. "How could I know?" "You didn't know," Holloway roared, making her jump. "It's not your job to know. It's your job to check a valid ticket and say, 'Welcome aboard.' You didn't see a hero. You didn't even see a passenger. You saw a black man and his family, and you decided they didn't belong. No, that's not. I was just following procedure for potential fraud." "Procedure," Holloway said, stepping so close she had to lean back. "You accused him of using a stolen credit card. You threatened to call security on his son. You humiliated his wife and his daughter. You did this in front of 100 people. You used the luxury of these seats as a weapon to profile a man who has bled for the very freedoms that give you the right to work here." He turned to the other flight attendant. "Sarah." "Yes, Captain," Sarah said, stepping forward immediately. "You will personally escort Master Chief Harrison and his family to their seats, 2A, B, C, and D. You will inform the entire cabin crew that they are my personal guests. Their in-flight services, any food, any drink, any Wi-Fi, it is all on my personal tab. Understood?" "With pleasure, Captain," Sarah said, her eyes shining. She turned to the Harrisons with a warm, genuine smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, right this way. We are so honored to have you." Diana, tears streaming down her face, took Maya's hand. Jamal, his face a mask of fierce, blazing pride, finally stopped recording and followed. Marcus was the last to move. He paused and looked at Captain Holloway. The 2 men shared a look of shared history, of shared sacrifice that no one else in that terminal could ever understand. "Thank you, Captain," Marcus said quietly. "No, Master Chief," Holloway replied, his voice thick again. "Thank you, and welcome aboard." As Marcus Harrison, the quiet man from Atlanta, turned and walked down the jet bridge, his limp more pronounced than usual, something incredible happened. It started with one person, a woman in the back of the line. She began to clap, then another and another. Within seconds, the entire gate area, B-32, erupted. The business travelers, the college students, the flight crews from other gates, even the man, Chad Peterson, his face pale with shame, were all on their feet, delivering a thunderous, standing ovation. Marcus Harrison didn't look back. He just kept walking, into the plane, to finally take his family on vacation. The applause faded as the jet bridge door closed. Captain Holloway stood for a moment, his chest heaving. He wiped his eyes on his sleeve, his composure returning, replaced by a cold, controlled fury. He turned and faced Susan Miller. The gate was still quiet, the remaining passengers watching her with open disgust. "Captain," Susan began, her voice a desperate, simpering whine. "Please, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I have 2 kids. I have a mortgage. Please, you can't. Don't report this. I'll apologize to him. I'll do anything." Holloway looked at her, his face carved from stone. "You're right about one thing, Miss Miller. You did make a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to see malice where there was none. You chose to wield your tiny bit of power to humiliate a family. You chose bigotry over basic human decency." "But I didn't know he was a hero," she cried. "That is the entire point," Holloway thundered, his voice once again silencing the concourse. He shouldn't have to be a hero to be treated like a human being. He shouldn't have to carry a Navy Cross to buy a first-class ticket. He just has to be a passenger. And you failed at the most basic part of your job. He unclipped the radio from his belt. "Ms. Miller, you are relieved of this gate, effective immediately. I want you to go to the Global Reach Operations Office and wait for Mr. Davenport." "No, please, Captain Holloway." "Mr. Davenport," Holloway continued, ignoring her pleas, "is the head of Atlanta Operations. I will be calling him from the cockpit as soon as we close the door. I will be advising him that I am filing a formal complaint citing federal anti-discrimination statutes and airline policy violations. I will be sending him my full, detailed report, and I will be demanding your immediate and permanent termination." Susan's legs seemed to give out. She sagged against the podium, tears of self-pity, not remorse, streaming down her face. "You're ruining my life." "You ruined your own life, Miss Miller," Holloway said, his voice flat. "Master Chief Harrison has a Navy Cross. Mr. Davenport has a termination form. We all make choices. Now get out of my sight. Another agent can handle the main cabin." He turned his back on her and walked into the jet bridge. The door hissed shut behind him. Susan Miller stood there, exposed. The crowd stared. She gathered her purse, her face a blotchy, tear-stained mask of hatred, and stumbled away from the gate, walking the long, agonizing walk of shame down the concourse, the eyes of 100 strangers following her like a spotlight. On the plane, the atmosphere was entirely different. Sarah, the lead flight attendant, had already informed the first-class cabin of what had happened. As Marcus, Diana, Jamal, and Maya settled into their large, plush seats, there was a quiet murmur of respect. "Mr. Harrison," said a man from row 3, the same Chad Peterson who had been so obnoxious at the gate. He was pale and sweating. I was in line behind you. I want to deeply apologize for my conduct. What I said, it was unacceptable. I'm sorry." Marcus just looked at him, his gaze level. "Be better," he said, and then turned to help Maya with her seatbelt. Chad Peterson sank back into his seat, looking ill. The flight was the most peaceful the Harrisons had ever experienced. Before the door even closed, Sarah was there with champagne for Diana and orange juice for the kids. "And Mr. Harrison, Master Chief, the captain wanted to know if you prefer coffee or tea." "Coffee is fine. Thank you, Sarah," he said, a small, tired smile on his face. Diana reached across the console and took his hand. "A Navy Cross, Marcus. You never told me. You never told me the details." "There was nothing to tell, Di. It was just a bad day," he whispered. "It was a heroic day," she said, squeezing his hand. "I'm so proud of you. I have no words." Jamal leaned over from the seat behind him. "Dad, that was insane. I got all of it. The agent, the captain, the salute, everything. It's wow." "Put the phone away, son. Let's just be a family," Marcus said, leaning his head back and closing his eyes for the first time. But Jamal, seeing the look on his father's face, knew this was more than just a family moment. This was news. He turned his phone's brightness down, connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, which Sarah had comped for the whole family, and began to upload the 10-minute video. He titled it, "Global Reach Airlines. Agent discriminates against black family. Until she finds out who the dad is." He hit post just as the plane's wheels left the runway in Atlanta. By the time Flight 1128 was over the Carolinas, the video had 50,000 views. By the time they began their descent into Northern Virginia, it had passed 1 million. Jamal's phone was vibrating itself into a frenzy. Comments, shares, retweets. The video was everywhere. It was a perfect storm, a clear-cut case of racial bias, a despicable antagonist, Susan, and a genuine cinematic hero, Captain Holloway, defending another genuine quiet hero, Marcus. Hashtags were already trending. Deutschland Global Reachgate, Master Chief Harrison, Most Captain Holloway, Most Salute. The corporate headquarters of Global Reach Airlines, based in Chicago, was in full-blown panic mode. Their PR department, alerted by automated social media trackers, was watching their brand's reputation freefall in real time. When Flight 1128 landed at Dulles International Airport, IAD, Captain Holloway's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Washington, D.C. We'll be at the gate in just a few minutes. I'd ask all passengers to please remain seated. We have a special welcome for our guests in row 2, and I'd like them to disembark first." A murmur went through the cabin. Marcus looked at Diana, confused. The plane docked. The ding sounded. The jet bridge connected. "Master Chief Harrison, Mrs. Harrison," Sarah said, her voice bright. "If you and your family would please follow me." They gathered their bags and walked to the front. The cabin door opened. Marcus stepped out first and froze. Lined up in the terminal, in 2 perfect parallel lines, was a full United States Navy Honor Guard. 10 sailors, in their immaculate dress white uniforms, stood at rigid attention. At the end of the line stood a Navy admiral, and beside him, a beaming Captain Thomas Holloway, who had somehow gotten off the plane first. As Marcus Harrison stepped into the terminal, the admiral barked a command. "Attention!" 10 pairs of heels clicked together. 10 hands snapped up in a salute. Captain Holloway, his pilot's cap under his arm, rendered his own salute once more. Marcus, overwhelmed, with his 10-year-old daughter clinging to his hand, stopped, squared his shoulders, and returned the salute to the honor guard. "Master Chief Harrison," the admiral said, stepping forward and shaking his hand firmly. "On behalf of the United States Navy, welcome to Washington." Captain Holloway radioed ahead. We wanted to show you how we really greet a hero. Your transport is waiting." The passengers disembarking behind them were stunned into silence, many filming the scene. The applause began again, this time mixed with camera flashes. Meanwhile, Jamal's video was doing its work. The hard karma was landing. Susan Miller had been fired before Flight 1128 even landed. Mr. Davenport, the Atlanta operations head, had seen the video, heard Captain Holloway's blistering report, and made the call immediately. She was escorted from the building by airport security, a "do not rehire" flag placed permanently on her file. But it didn't stop there. The obnoxious passenger, Chad Peterson, was not so lucky as to be anonymous. His face was clearly visible in Jamal's video, sneering, "Kick them to the back of the bus." He was a senior partner at a high-profile D.C. law firm, Kitteridge and Bain. By 5 p.m. that day, his firm's managing partners, having been inundated with calls and emails linking to the video, held an emergency meeting. They released a statement. "The conduct of Mr. Peterson is not reflective of the values of this firm. He has been suspended, effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. His career was, for all intents and purposes, over. Global Reach Airlines was in free fall. Their stock price tumbled, wiping out over $150 million in market value in a single afternoon. The CEO, James Powell, a man who rarely spoke to the public, was forced to schedule a live press conference for the following morning. The Harrisons, shielded from the media storm by the Navy, were quietly transported to their hotel. Their trip to the Navy Memorial the next day was done with a full military escort. It was no longer just a private family moment. It had become a national story. The next morning, the corporate headquarters of Global Reach Airlines in Chicago was a war room. The stock had opened with a catastrophic 12% drop, a paper loss that had already exceeded $150 million by 10 a.m. The video, now sitting at 45 million views globally, was being played on every major news network, not just in the US, but in Europe and Asia. The brand was toxic. At 11 a.m., a haggard-looking CEO, James Powell, a man known for his ruthless corporate efficiency, not his public empathy, walked to a podium. The room was packed with reporters, the bright lights making him sweat under his $1,000 suit. "Good morning," he began, his voice strained. He cleared his throat, adjusting the microphone. "Yesterday, on our flight 1128 from Atlanta, an incident occurred. It was not a customer service failure. It was not a misunderstanding. Let's call it what it is. It was an act of blatant and appalling discrimination. It is unacceptable, it is horrifying, and it is not who we are." A reporter shouted, "Mr. Powell, it seems like it is who you are, isn't it?" Powell flinched but pressed on, his PR-coached words sounding hollow. The actions of the former employee in Atlanta, Ms. Susan Miller, who was terminated before Flight 1128 even landed, are a betrayal of our company's values. Furthermore, the conduct of another passenger, Mr. Peterson, which was also captured on video, is equally reprehensible. He went on to praise Captain Thomas Holloway, calling him a man of true integrity, a credit to this airline, and a model for all our employees. He detailed the events, his voice shaking slightly when he recounted Captain Holloway's salute and the revelation of Master Chief Harrison's service. "But," Powell said, looking directly into the main camera, "apologies are not enough. Words are cheap. Action is required." He then laid out the hard karma for the company. First, Global Reach was making an immediate $1 million donation to the Wounded Warrior Project, and another $1 million to the NACP Legal Defense Fund, both in Master Chief Marcus Harrison's name. Second, the entire Harrison family was being offered free, first-class flights on Global Reach Airlines anywhere in the world, for life. "It is a small, small token," Powell said, "for the humiliation we put them through." Third, he announced a complete, top-to-bottom overhaul of their customer-facing policies. Effective today, our entire workforce, from gate agents to flight attendants to our executive team, will undergo a new, mandatory, and comprehensive anti-bias and de-escalation training program. This will not be a 1-hour online module. It will be an intensive, ongoing certification, and frankly, anyone who fails it will not have a future at this airline. The media, of course, was not satisfied. They were in a frenzy, camped outside the Harrisons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Jamal's phone was unusable, flooded with messages from producers at Good Morning America, CNN, and The Today Show, all offering six-figure sums for the exclusive rights to his video and the family's first interview. But the Harrisons, shielded by a protective bubble provided by the Navy, ignored them all. They had a schedule to keep. Their trip to the Navy Memorial the next day was transformed. It was no longer a quiet, private pilgrimage. The admiral who had greeted them at the airport, Admiral Mark Stanfield, met them there personally. As the family stood before the granite map of the world, Admiral Stanfield stood beside Marcus. "Master Chief," the Admiral said quietly, while camera flashes flickered from a respectful distance. "We in the command read the reports from the Bainbridge 15 years ago. We knew what you did. But to see it brought to light like this, you've reminded a lot of people what the words honor and courage actually mean." Marcus watched Maya trace the outline of the African continent on the map. He thought of the red sand, of Petty Officer Davis, of the weight of Michael Holloway on his back, and for the first time, he didn't feel the crushing guilt. He felt a release. He gave only one short statement to the press pool as he left. He stood with his arm around Diana, Jamal, and Maya by his side. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not used to this kind of attention. 15 years ago, I was just a sailor, doing my job. Yesterday, I was just a father, trying to take his family on a trip. What that agent did was wrong. It was ugly, and it happens to people who don't have a Captain Holloway to step in for them. I hope this makes people think about that." He paused, then continued. "But what Captain Holloway did, what Admiral Stanfield and the Navy did, that was right. That's the America I fought for. That's the Navy I served. I'm just thankful for him, and I'm thankful for my family who stood by me." He would not answer any more questions. They finished their trip. They visited the monuments. They walked the halls of the history museums. And when Marcus woke up on November 2nd, the ghosts of November 1st were no longer banging on the door. They were quiet. The date was no longer just an anniversary of loss and pain. It was now and forever the day his captain had his back. The day his son showed the world the truth. The day his family and the whole world finally saw the hero he had always been. For their return, Global Reach Airlines, desperate to avoid another public spectacle, chartered a private Gulfstream G650 for the family. As they soared smoothly at 40,000 feet, sipping sodas and eating gourmet snacks in plush leather seats, the silence was comfortable. Jamal was quietly typing on his new, top-of-the-line laptop, a thank you gift from a tech blogger who had made a fortune mirroring the video. He was drafting a scholarship essay for college, the topic, an event that shaped your view of justice. Diana was looking out the window, a small, satisfied smile on her face. She reached over and took Marcus's hand. "So," she said, her eyes twinkling, "free flights, for life, anywhere in the world." Marcus looked at her, then at his children, who were both looking at him, grinning. A feeling of lightness, one he hadn't felt in years, filled his chest. "Where to next, hero?" Diana asked again. Marcus Harrison leaned his head back against the rich cream leather and let out a full, genuine laugh. "I was thinking," he said. "I've never seen Paris." What a story. A family just trying to reclaim a painful memory is met with the worst kind of prejudice. But the universe stepped in. It turned out that the gate agent, Susan Miller, wasn't just harassing a passenger. She was disrespecting a national hero, and she did it right in front of the one man on Earth who owed his son's life to him. The karma was swift, and it was hard. Susan Miller lost her job. The arrogant passenger, Chad, lost his. And the airline? They paid dearly, both in cash and in reputation. But more importantly, a good man, a true hero, Master Chief Marcus Harrison, was finally given the honor he deserved, not in a private ceremony, but in front of the whole world. It shows that you should never judge a book by its cover. You never, ever know who you're talking to. What did you think of this story? What was your favorite moment of karma? Was it the salute, or was it when the CEO had to grovel? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love stories where arrogance is met with justice, and where heroes get the respect they're due, then make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. We have new, real-life dramatic stories coming for you every single week. Thanks for watching.